So welcome. We decided on this theme, I thought that based mainly on the archive of Raymond Lemaire, which some of you have had chance to visit yesterday, I could propose something about the role of ICOMOS in the development of an international doctrine during the 31st years of its existence. In fact, when I proposed this topic, I didn't realize that it was absolutely much too ambitious to prepare for a conference presentation. So I did part of the job, but I won't be able to present it because it's too much. So I will only present some really small parts of the results and also the questions these results raise for the work of our committee and of ICOMOS in general. Well, first I prepared this map because this is a map of us, of the people attending the conference. So Pierre already said that there were people from a little bit all around the globe, but that's a fact. We are missing, in fact, people from Latin America. I think we should put some effort in involving people from that part of the world, but I think that's already a nice mix of people coming from different parts, but this is not part of my presentations. It's just an extra slide. So I don't know if you often go to the new website of ICOMOS. There's a new website which started last year or 2 years ago, I don't remember. If you click on history, this is what you find, and this is everything you find. So that means that when you want to learn more about the history of ICOMOS, half of it is about the Venice Charter, which is questionable, I think. Well, is it really so important? Well, it seems so. And then the second half are really very short paragraphs about the links of ICOMOS with UNESCO, and the historical background is only about what happened before ICOMOS. But what did ICOMOS? How did it evolve? How did it develop? No, not a single information is available. If you go on the page dedicated to the doctrinal document until tomorrow, well, you find a list of these documents, but whereas before on the old website, they were ordered per date, now they are ordered per theme. So that means that it doesn't give at all an idea of the activity of ICOMOS and how these documents were developed over time. And also on this new website, you miss something which I really used a lot for my research, which was the list of all the general assemblies of ICOMOS with links to their proceedings. Now it doesn't exist, and these links are not active anymore. So I think this new website really went backwards for history of ICOMOS, and ICOMOS really didn't even start to write its own history. I think that's really a pity. So in these, these masterworks about history of conservation, of course, there are a few pages dedicated to ICOMOS, the foundation of ICOMOS, the work of ICOMOS with UNESCO, but this remains very, very general, and there is nothing in particular to what exactly did ICOMOS, how many committees were founded in which year, or who were the members of ICOMOS. This remains really very general. So this is a little bit helpful, but not very much. As for the doctrinal documents, there are a few studies, very detailed studies, mainly carried on by Christina Cameron with collaborators. We discussed that yesterday also at the archive for those who were there. And she made a very detailed record of how the World Heritage Convention developed, and also about the drafting of the Nara Convention. But about all the other doctrinal documents in which ICOMOS took part in, we don't have that kind of study. So this is the sort of a timeline of the documents you find on the website of ICOMOS during this 31st years I'm addressing in this presentation. So there is a Venice Charter, then cultural tourism, Florence Charter, on gardens, Washington Charter, Bogusław talked about, and then you see that it multiplies as time passes. In fact, what I didn't say before is that we didn't write that history, but I think the material to write it really is available. It's really available. Because if you go on this ICOMOS website, there are many, many publications where you can find some clues about the history of ICOMOS, and you have, of course, archive. As the archive of Le Maire we saw yesterday, there is already plenty of material to work on this, on writing the history of ICOMOS. So in the archive of Le Maire, that's what was my main source for this presentation. It doesn't work now, doesn't move. Yes. So you find quite extensive documentation on these three documents. So the Venice Charter, Washington Charter, and the Nara document. We saw all that yesterday as well, but you also find traces of other documents because, as you know, since the beginning, ICOMOS was recognized a consultant for UNESCO, and already in the 1960s, so UNESCO put ICOMOS in charge of the scientific concept that formed the basis of the doctrine. So ICOMOS was also asked by UNESCO to develop this doctrinal aspect. So that means that in the archive of Le Maire, you find really a lot of information. I'm sorry, this really doesn't work well. Okay, on the World Heritage Convention, on the drafting of the World Heritage Convention, and on the discussions about the operational guidelines of the convention. But ICOMOS was also very much connected to the activities of the Council of Europe in the 1960s and 1970s. Already in 1963, so before the Venice Congress, Piero Gazzola was already invited by the Council of Europe to take part in the discussions about new reflections about historical ensemble. And he was invited because he was the organizer of the Venice Conference. So at the moment, the Council of Europe was willing to organize a conference in 1964 at the Cini Foundation, exactly where the Venice conference took part. But then they delayed this organization by 1 year, and they started the organization of their congresses in 1965 because there was the Venice Congress, which was considered to be the right place to start these discussions. So the ICOMOS was very, very much linked also to the Council of Europe from the very start. And that means that if you want to look at this history, we also have to look at the Charter for Architectural Heritage of 1975. So that's basically the 5 documents I looked into for this conference. And I won't be able to tell you at all everything I found out, but I will just sum it up in 2 ways, through 2 different tools. First, an interconnected timeline, and second, a network mapping, which I hope will work on this computer. I'm really hoping. So let's start with the interconnected timeline. If we look at the documents and we simply put them on a timeline, they look like dots. They look like separate objects in time, happening at a certain moment in time. If you look at these documents through the archive, not only the archive of Le Maire, but also the archive of UNESCO and the Council of Europe, which are available online, and that's very practical. You see that these documents are processes which develop through time. So for some of them, the process started a long time before the drafting of the document. For others, it really was prolonged very long after the drafting of the document. For example, the Venice Charter, we are still talking about it, and there was this long revision process which lasted during the whole period that we are dealing with here in this presentation. For the World Heritage Convention, after the drafting, which was not very long, the operational guidelines were discussed and rediscussed and rediscussed all the time, and ICOMOS was always involved in this. For the European Charter, in fact, the discussion started only already in the 1960s, and so on. So you see that these documents are processes rather than isolated products. And then when you start to look at really at the documents and understand how this process took place, this timeline becomes this. So it means that these documents are not each one on their own line. In fact, they are very, very much interconnected. Of course, this is not possible for you to understand without explanation, but it just gives you an idea of how it works. So that means that all these documents are very much interconnected. They are using the reflections carried on for a single document. These discussions are transferred to another one. Some reports produced in the framework of a document are used in another document, and so on. So of course, I won't have time to develop all this here. First, I started to do it, but then I just gave up because it would have been really, really too long. And this, of course, is not complete. It's only part of the process, because what we also would have to look into are all these are the documents I excluded from the start, but also here I only did this research for the first 15 years, but these are all the resolutions of congresses organized by ICOMOS, because in many of these early congresses of ICOMOS, there were resolutions about historic cities, about this, about that. And these resolutions also fed with the documents which were drafted at the same moment. So this is even more complex. And then you also have all the scientific committees which appeared over time. And so and these scientific committees also carried on their own reflections, which were taken into account into all these documents. So I think this gives an idea of the complexity of this history of ICOMOS, but I find it a very fascinating object of study, I must say. So this was the first way to look at the process. The second way to look at the process is through people, because who works in all these working groups, who drafts these reports, who takes part in the discussions and so on, who writes the documents? People. So let's look at the same process through people, and here I pray it works on this. So this is another way to look at the same process. So through network mapping. So these are the 6 documents we are looking at. So as we saw, it's still shared. So these are the 6 documents we are looking at. The colors are from the different organizations from which they originate. And as we saw, these documents are interconnected together. And then what I did is that in each archival piece I found in the archive, I took all the names of the people who took part in drafting, in discussions, in adoptions, in all these meetings, and I put them in a database. And so these are the people involved. So yeah, these are the people involved. There are between 300 and 400. I don't know. I didn't count at the end, but which is not so much, you know, because we are talking about 6 different doctrinal documents by 3 organizations over 30 years. So these are not so many people. Of course, not everybody is there. Okay, the work is not finished. It's only a conference presentation. I did my best to do it. So when you look at these dots, you see that the color of the dots is depends on the organization they are from. So you see that ICOMOS, but this is really not easy enough to see my own screen, so I don't know the colors by heart. So you see the blue is ICOMOS. So you see that ICOMOS is very present in there. Unknown is people who were in the list and I didn't know to which organization they belong. So UNESCO, Council of Europe, ICRAM, ICOM, IUCN, and European Astra, but these are only a very, very few people involved. And then if we put that together, then we come to this to this graph. And then in this graph, what you can see, the color is still linked to the institutions of the people, but you can see which organization took part in which document. So for example, for the European Charter, I'm sorry, I don't see anything.
Nothing is visible.
Anything online?
Do you see something? Is there a problem?
The title.
Okay, does it work now?
Yes.
Do you see the? Okay.
No, it is visible.
Okay. Okay. Great. So on this graph, you see the groups of people taking part in the drafting of each and the adoption and the discussion of each of these documents. So here you have the Washington Charter, the Nara document, the Venice Charter. It's too small for you to read, but you have the European Charter, the revision process, etc., of the Venice Charter. But what is interesting are the people in the middle of the graph, because that means that these people were very much involved in multiple documents. So it's mainly through these people that these connections between the documents happened. So if here it's very small to see, but if you click on a person, let's say this person, you can see all the connections of the person to all the documents. And I like to find Lanari, but that's really too small for me to find. Maybe here. No? Yeah, so you see that he's connected, of course, to all the documents, but it's also because I'm working from his archive, of course. So you have many documents involving him. So there are biases that have to be studied. But well, this says already something about who were the people who were like in the center of this network. And then, of course, you can also play with this network and give different colors to the dots. For example, in this graph, you see the people per gender. Just guess which color is women. So, of course, some of these yellow dots are not experts. They are secretaries and people taking notes and so on. But there are still some experts in this. But I'm missing one page. Normally there was another one before, which was interesting. But do you see an arrow on that side? Yes. I don't see it. Is it further? Yes. Here. But why does it go? Okay, this one was per continent. So it shows the involvement of people from different parts of the world. So yes, you can guess which color is Europe. It works as for the gender, but still you see that in some, of course, this is the European Charter. So that's normal that you have many European people. But if you look at the World Heritage Convention, for example, you have a greater diversity of people. So I think that this kind of tool can really be very useful to study the history of ICOMOS and the study of drafting of all these documents. And I won't have time to go more into detail into this this research. But this is, you can also make calculations with that kind of software. And here the dots have a different weight depending on the amount of connection a person has. So of course there you can see immediately which persons have the most connections. Of course you see the mayor has the bigger dot, but you have Michel Parent, Gérard Bolla, who was someone from UNESCO, Piero Gazzola, Alfred Schmidt, etc. Oh, I'm drawing on my presentation. Sorry, it won't work today. The technical stuff is really messy, but I'm sorry for that. Okay, so I will come to my conclusion because I could talk about this for hours. But well, first of all, well, I would like to say that ICOMOS should really do that work, and I'm really willing to participate. But it's really impossible for a single person to do that alone. So this comes to my next slide. So please help if someone is interested in doing that. I think there is a team needed to work on that topic. And I think that writing this history right now is very important. And I think this connects to what Bogusław just said, because we are really at a turning point, as you said. ICOMOS is also being very much criticized for its past action. It's seen through new lenses, let's say, the lenses of gender, the lenses of post-colonial questions, and so on. And I think that to discuss these new ways to look at history, we need really a solid data set. We need to know what we're talking about. So I think that's really an important contribution to make, just to document what happened, who was involved, why were the decision made. And I think also that this would be very interesting for ICOMOS in order to not to present itself as they do right now on the website, because this is so static, this is so past looking. And I think this would be a way also to present the work of ICOMOS in a more dynamic and interconnected way. And so this seems quite urgent to me to do that. And I also wanted to say a last word about our committee, TheoPhilos. Why don't we make more connections with other bodies, with other international bodies? Because I think that these connections between people from ICOMOS, from UNESCO, and so on, there are these connections, of course, at the level of ICOMOS. But in our committee, I think it would be interesting to be more proactive in creating these discussions with these bodies. That's already what we will do tonight with the roundtable, but maybe this should be something more important in our committee. So thank you very much.
Okay, so what I'm going to do today is very simple, and it's intended as a provocation. It's intended as the beginning of a conversation. So, and this stems from a very simple observation that we do in ICOMOS generally, in TheoPhilos included, we do very little philosophy. And why is that? And the philosophy that we have, I would say, is highly suspect. So that's the nature of this presentation. How do I move it? Yes.
How did it?
Yes. Yes. That's moving. Yes. That's moving.
Ah,
with
okay.
this.
This.
Okay.
I think. Try again.
Yes. Perfect. Okay. So a 4-point agenda. Firstly, I want to talk about stratigraphy, the layers that are not visible necessarily on which we stand and on which we act. I want to diagnose the problem that we have. I want to offer a prescription, and then I want to return home. And I'll explain what that means. So, stratigraphy. So this is just a proposal. A lot of what we're concerned with is projects, interventions in the historic environment. They sit at a top level, beneath which are practices. So those are, for example, national processes, legislation. Beneath that sits theory. So our doctrinal documents, all of that. And beneath that sits philosophy. Now, each of these has appeals to a different audience. So we have specialists at the top. We have conservation structures. We have heritage more broadly, and at each stage we're bringing in more people. And finally, believe it or not, with philosophy, one can talk to the whole culture. So there's a broadening out as you go down in this foundation. There's a broadening out in potential reach. And the other thing about the philosophy, in a sense, that's the bedrock. It goes all the way down. It's not possible to get underneath it to understand it. The other bits you can understand because you can get underneath them and hold them, as it were. Not so with the philosophy. This is my model. And TheoPhilos, of course, we are the International Committee for the Theory and Philosophy of Conservation and Restoration. So we are dealing with those bottom two elements. At least that's what we claim to be doing. So here's diagnosis. First point about the diagnosis is basically we don't do philosophy. There's in England, there's a very good book by a chap called John Earle, which is entitled The Philosophy of Conservation, I think it is. It's a book which deals very well with the theory side of it, all the conventions and different aspects of it. It says nothing whatsoever about philosophy. There is no philosopher mentioned anywhere. There is no philosophy. It's a philosophy-free zone. I have never been more disappointed in such a good book because it is missold. It's not doing what it says on the tin. So philosophy for us is sort of terra incognita. We just don't go there. We've never explored it. It's also terra timutinda. It's a place to be feared, it seems. We're afraid to go there. I think there's a better way of doing this. Moving on with the diagnosis, the philosophical foundation that we have is highly suspect. It's poorly chosen and it's very fragile. And my argument is that the foundation that we have is positivism. I don't know why we chose positivism, but that's where a lot of the aspects of what we are and how we are seen and the problems that we have, they come from that initial choice. It's like our original sin, or it's Maleficent in Snow White giving this horrible gift. At our birth, we are given positivism. Not a good choice. Positivism is based on the idea that science alone is the standard for true knowledge. One of the features of positivism is precisely its postulate that scientific knowledge is the paradigm of valid knowledge. A postulate that, of course, is never proved nor intended to be proved. It's just claimed. So it's entirely self-defeating. And hence we have this term scientism. And this was, of course, very, very dominant in the mid-20th century. But it has passed. It's long since passed. And there's the sort of most radical form of it, if you like, is verificationism, where only those things which can be proved are true. Everything else you ignore. Now that doesn't fit conservation. It doesn't fit heritage. Heritage and conservation are dealing with something completely different. So it's a very unhelpful foundation for us to have. So what are some of the consequences? We've dressed ourselves in scientific language. We are one of the 30 or so scientific committees. Are we scientific? I think not. We treat conservation as a technical thing before it is a cultural thing. Both are important, don't get me wrong. The ability to analyze material scientifically is very important, but it's not a sufficient description of the whole thing. It's not the paradigm of what we're doing. So it's an essential ingredient, but not the whole thing. And we tend to talk a lot about case studies, the particular case, without being able to broaden and go down into the philosophy and come up with a better question. We are, in terms of what we do, we are basically a branch of ethics, I would say, because we are thinking, in this case, what should I do? That is fundamentally, that is an ethical question. We are a discipline of ethics. And yet we have this philosophical structure that weighs us down. It distorts what we do. We are fundamentally interpretative. Billy mentioned earlier, all translation is a question of interpretation. Absolutely right. But even without translation, if I say to my grandchild, don't worry, I will take care of you, that's a nice thing, an appropriate thing for a grandfather to say to his grandchild. If I say, Don't you worry, I'll take care of you. That's a threat. You have exactly the same words, but a completely different interpretation, a completely different meaning, and positivism cannot tell the difference. Positivism is based on a one-to-one equivalence between word and meaning, which is illusory, it's impossible. So we need something that is more interpretative. I want to move on and talk about some of the danger that we face. So this is a classic conservation problem in northern climates, where you have brickwork that is being eroded away. And it's being eroded away because the wall has been originally built with lime mortar, has been repointed with cement mortar. Cement mortar is too hard, it keeps the bricks wetter, they erode with the frost. Very simple. This is Conservation 101. So it's a conservation problem. It is also, I suggest, a metaphor for a philosophical problem. So the conservation problem, you have the masonry unit, you have the modern mortar, and the modern mortar helps the masonry unit to be eroded away, to be destroyed, to be lost. I would say that the metaphor is that the masonry unit is a building, and if we apply the wrong philosophy to it, a philosophy that is too hard, a philosophy that is not flexible, a philosophy that doesn't breathe, then we would destroy the heritage. This is serious. You know, we are doing, the choice of our philosophy undermines the fundamental, the basis of what we're trying to do, which is, as I say, ethical. It is to act for good. So, at the same time, we also face some legitimate challenges. In the Faro Convention, for example, the Faro Convention asks, where are the people? You know, what the role of heritage for society? How do the people that we are supposed to be serving, how do the people play with the feature in heritage decision making? The realm of critical heritage studies has emerged. We have allowed that to emerge because we have been so inwardly focused, I would say. And we are being accused of fetishizing expert knowledge. I think in some respects we are guilty as charged. And we struggle to respond to these challenges because we basically don't have the philosophical tools to deal with them. So where might we find those philosophical tools? Well, firstly, we need to go into the philosophy, and we need to do two things. We need to engage with the philosophy, but we also need to choose a better philosophy, a better philosophical stratum from which to work. And I think it has to be hermeneutical. Hermeneutics, incidentally, originally was labeled anti-positivism. Very interesting. And proudly so, I would say. This is Gadamer. Philosophical hermeneutics participates in a philosophical movement of our century that overcame the one-sided orientation towards the scientific fact, taken for granted by neo-Kantianism, as well as by the positivism of that time. Hermeneutic reflection discloses conditions of truth in the sciences that do not derive from the logic of scientific discovery, but are prior to it. Hermeneutics gives us access to stuff that positivism never can. Incidentally, our building of conservation around values, deriving significance from values, values have a very distinct philosophical pedigree. They are philosophies attempt to add the human back into a positivist vision of the nature of being, which has subtracted all the life from it. It's like trying to reconstitute mashed potato from, you know, kind of from those packets of mashed potato. It's nonsense. You don't want to do that if you want nice mashed potatoes. So hermeneutics is in my view, a much better place to start. And there's that basic division between the two types of philosophy. To conclude, there are also opportunities that we have missed, opportunities that I think we should pursue. we need to think a lot more about significance, and Gadama is a good place to start with significance. We need to think about tradition, what living tradition means, what that means for knowledge, and also Gadama has a lot to say on that too. Identity, Ricoeur makes a really interesting distinction between sameness and ipseity. What he's asking is how identity can survive through change, which is absolutely the sort of question we should be asking. So there's a huge philosophical resource there that we have just ignored because we've got the wrong philosophy to start with. And change through time, very interesting pursuit that would inform what we do. The good news is that TheoPhilos, because we are we deal with both theory and philosophy, is the natural home for this. This is where this should be happening. So it is a plea to abandon the curse of positivism that we were given at birth and to engage with a better philosophical framework. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Hello, good morning, everybody. I couldn't have the better introduction to my presentation than those colleagues that went before me. Each of us opened a very right questions, really, and we didn't manage it in advance, so it's a very happy coincidence. Well, I was first warned that I have changed the title of my presentation a little bit, not to start with the statement, but better with the question, because I truly believe that we need to make also some debate about this question. And ethics, as you know, is a part of philosophical background. So I very much follow the lines of Nigel before me. So TheoPhilos, as the second part of our title says, deals with philosophy, and ethics is really needed in this regard as well. As you know, now in Lumbini General Assembly, the Assembly made also the adaptation to the ethical principles of our organization. And if you look briefly into this new redaction, you see that it concentrates only on two topics: how we address our public and how we do our expert work better. So in line of what I want to say, my starting point really is to briefly consider three major ethical philosophical traditions, namely classical Greek, ancient Indian tradition, and Chinese Confucianism, to point out how this tradition, which is also a part of our philosophical heritage as a humanity, and draw some lessons for the task I believe is ahead of us. So my first slide goes to Aristotle, because you know that Aristotle is very famous for leaving us with the Nicomachean ethics and also politics, for example, where you see that I will concentrate my desired points of view only in three major straits that is important for each philosophical tradition. So for Greek one, I'll you see political art and ethics, which is the highest principle, how to get to the knowledge, the best knowledge in Aristotle's view. Then the role of personal virtues, which are something that we must train the whole of our life. It's not given to us from the start point. And Aristotle speaks about two kinds of virtues, namely intellectual ones and moral ones. The first require experience and time, and the second is the result of habit. So, and virtues are regarded as a midpoint between two extremes. Not only the one extreme is good or the other one, but the middle point is important. And the third pillar for Aristotle is justice. It is unlike other virtues because it relates to our neighbors, to the other, not to ourselves. And the crossing points of all three pillars, you find good citizens who are obedient to laws, then good statesmen, people who are dedicated fully to our common good, and democratic states whose role also is to educate citizens. And at the center of all three pillars is eudaimonia. This is a personal state reached by people who excelled in the virtue. But since it is also a communal ethic, it is considered to be the final good. If we go to Indian tradition, those of you who were in Lumbini, you could see the pillar of Ashoka. So Ashoka, the king Ashoka, who lived in the 3rd century BC and unified Indian subcontinent, he made a great effort to bring the principles of Dharma, the highest teaching, to all his subjects and also to the neighboring countries. So he, in his words, it is not a purely Buddhist concern, but a kind of civil religion he wanted to teach, a kind of moral code. And it is partly directed towards individuals and communities, but also a great role is given to the officials and emissaries that serve Dharma. At the meeting point, you find respect for all living beings, king that leads by example. So he is the more he's really a model for others to follow. And ecumenism and peace, because he wanted to promote a message of concord, harmony, and collaboration between among religious communities. And at the center, again, happiness, but as for Eastern concepts of happiness, we should say that due to reincarnation and karma, ethical conduct leads to happiness in both this life and in the next lives. The third tradition is here represented by Confucius, who lived during the period of approximately 600 years before Christ. For him and his followers, heavenly balance reflects on earth, and personal ethical growth realizes in families and communities. And a good government needs to be sustained by officials who, and the role of officials is for him the noblest intellectual and moral vocation. So the crossing road between heavenly balance and communities lies the respect for ancestors and their culture. So families and communities have the duty to honor the deceased. The community includes past, present, and future generations. Benevolent ruler and his ministers is also important for assuring this balance in society. And social well-being stems from coherent families and communities backed by effective governance. So harmony between heavenly order and humans lies at the core of this ethics. I want to stress also the dark sides of human conduct according to all three traditions. So in short, features that are unique to each tradition emphasize disruption in social order. In ancient Greek tradition, caution is raised against tyranny and anarchy, considering them the greatest violations of democracy. In Indian tradition highlights the importance of not killing sentient beings. And the Chinese tradition warns against disrespecting the dead, parents, and superiors. So, for example, in Chinese tradition, if the community finds out that the ruler and ministers violate the heavenly order, it is their moral duty to replace them. Now we jump to the present time, and I want to point out what, in my view, are heritage ethics deficiencies. So, the first of all, it is European or Western-centric heritage standards that create a divide between tangible and intangible heritage, heritage of natural environment, and thereby fragmenting the ethical messages underlying all heritage and its context. The second one is the disregard of citizens' needs and expectations in heritage processes. Western individualistic paradigm could be described as rights without corresponding responsibilities. And authorized heritage discourse, which is a top-down authoritarian practice that hinders public participation and the enforcement of democratic values. Another deficiency is also, in my view, lack of teamwork, which results in hampering heritage management of a more comprehensive understanding of heritage. So you see in both last slides that these circles do not connect to each other, which is also typical for lack of complexity, understanding of complexity of our work. So I would like to point out now to the three key heritage factors that ensure personal and collective identity in kind of meaning making. This is something that I presented in our TheoPhilos conference in Thessaloniki last year, so I don't want to go into detail here, but to remind you briefly that knowledge, all three elements are really intangible one. We can explain them as a kind of intangible heritage. So knowledge can bring vitality to memory and values, while memory can give depth to both other factors, and values give coherence to all other heritage factors. And now my concluding slide, which is a little bit complicated, but I can say that heritage theory must address the complex heritage significance in modern societies, which includes ethical values, knowledge, and memories. So sites of memories, for example, reflect values such as justice, while examples of difficult heritage warns us against harmful effects of conflicts and wars. And accessibility through free flow of all these elements give the background for information flow, education, and equitably physical and intellectual access of everyone to heritage. So institutional framework is quite important because it can promote heritage values by integrating international and national standards and instruments, while consistently encouraging democratic public participation. So heritage communities must serve as the guardians of collective memory, where individuals, heritage communities, and heritage practitioners participate fairly in heritage management. At the crossroad of these important traits are families, in my respect. That is something that we usually not take enough care of, because families are the foundation of cultural heritage. We should concentrate and enable families to share their personal and family histories, while also engaging with them in their local environment. Accountable politicians and experts emphasize the importance of ensuring that individuals and communities have the right to access, interpret, and preserve heritage and their values. Meanwhile, of course, politicians and experts are continuously scrutinized by citizens. So a meaningful link between heritage, living spaces, and the natural environment reinforces the shared ethical principles underlying all heritage and its context, as well as the respect of heritage of others. Social well-being is an overall outcome of the threefold heritage ethics system, or in Aristotle's words, eudaimonia, or in Buddhist and Confucian terms, happiness. So my conclusive consideration regarding the ethics and heritage rights could be. I tried to demonstrate that each civilization is rooted in unique shared values, collective memories, and traditional worldviews. They hold their own idea about order, authority, and justice. Expecting everyone to adapt Western ethics, which developed within specific historical context, is unrealistic. I believe that ethics should go beyond just rules guiding our professional conduct. Heritage professionals are responsible to follow the golden ethical rule of treating others as we would wish to be treated ourselves. So heritage rights are restricted by the rights of others, including foreigners and the deceased. So some reference I used for preparation of this presentation give you the insight into the breadth of the topic that that is important in this matter. So I thank you very much for the time given, and I would ask you to comment what have I missed in my presentation and what else might assist us in better tackling the task of overall ethical principles. Thank you very much.
Okay, good morning, guten tag, bonjour, buongiorno. It's difficult in 15 minutes present the mission of ICOMOS, our proposal, because 40 years I remember Professor Lemaire in many occasions during my first meeting in Rome in 1981. Okay, our idea is ICOMOS is the principal organization for conservation, restoration, and protection of our cultural heritage. Our mission is, you remember Venice Charter after the war, after the improper addition, after the too much mistake, for this arrived the Venice Charter. Then we have Amsterdam, that is in some slides is very clear why we have the Venice Charter in all world. And then some architect, Lemaire, Minissi, Scarpa, I remember János Seldmayer and Miklos Orler in Hungary, worked together for presented this document. And I remember this. Before Venice Charter, during the Venice Charter, the modern architecture, the modern insertion for conserving. Then arrived the Amsterdam Declaration. Is important because we have some mistake in Brussels, in Amsterdam, and the insertion and the work for the citizen. The citizen enter in conservation for the political help, the political. You remember Victor Horta in Sablon, no? We are in Belgium. And please, don't forget this. But in many charter, Nara, the authenticity, beginning some misunderstanding. Then arrive Xian Faro, the citizen help, the social is important in connection, work together, but in Faro declaration 20 years ago, enter the new elements in conservation. All together are important. Well, then in the recent year, Friburgo Declaration is important. Friburgo Declaration in Europa Nostra, Council of Europe, and so. Please, I prefer walking. Burgo Declaration, because we haven't the time. Then, another mistake is famous for urban regeneration during and after Venice Charter. This is some mistake when don't arrive the training, when don't arrive the correct information, and then arrive the urban landscape heritage in Paris. Okay, finally, I think our work in many years, you must remember the European Cultural Heritage Summit in Brussels last month, where repropose some conservation of cultural material heritage, sites, monument, landscape, and museum. The immaterial heritage as a builder of cultural and the stakeholder, heritage for peace, this is important in last year, memory, and this manifesto is important for ICOMOS, work together. Well, in current trends, this is the situation. Please, attention, without misunderstanding, because in many centuries, in many different countries, we speak without remember our common basic elements. The conservation, restoration is different declination in different age. And then out the restoration is parallel. Reconstruction is important, is necessary, but isn't restoration. We must work together for the young generation. Okay, the mission, our work in many years, the proposal, we must work especially in this different branch, archaeology, reconstruction, restoration. Please, we have many monuments, many sites where we must work only the maintenance. For this, our committee is important, must give the guideline of all committee. Our committee is important for this. Without theory, is impossible the practice. Isn't important the activity. Like for this, in this case, the maintenance is only necessary, only maintenance. Or in Vaticano, it's important the maintenance and the accessibility. But please, in Rome, we have some mistake in this when some political men work without specialists for tourism. This is a problem today, the massive tourism. Or Angkor Wat only is important this, conserving the natural together, and the men help. This is wonderful. The consolidation. Oh, this is the improper work in many Mediterranean area or in Ethiopia. The protection, the shelter is important. The cooperation from Athens Charter, the cooperation between the specialists, please. The use, the use is another important mission for the future in all world. An ancient crypta, a library, and so. Or in this different use in many church maintain the use, and then the new aula magna. This is an example, but is in all countries we have the same. This is the compatibility use in many architects. This is our mission in our school, in our ICOMOS. Don't forget this important work you many years ago. In the many cinema, the new activity, the new compatibility or incompatibility work. Please, you prefer speak. You have many examples in all world where it's possible seen this. For this, another use, reuse, or the extension, another problem in many countries. Why we have some mistake? some improper mistake. This is when some archists are working in the persistence. This is another problem. For this, ICOMOS don't forget the idea, the guideline. This is our mission. If you prefer, for continuous.
So thank you, Calogero. Yes, and now the new use and also the architecture as a circle. Yes, circus. This is architecture as a circus. And now the economics, what happens with this economics, but also a symbol. It was a very important symbol in Madrid, and also the economy is important. Anybody said that this was not happen, this must not happen. Another thing, accessibility. Yes, accessibility, but we can hear a very beautiful example in Rome where a lift is inside this space, but it's not broken, this space. The columns are not broken, they are respected. But in other place, for example, what happened in that the tower was destroyed in the interior. Few not days, but not so many time ago, and to put the lift inside and to put this there. But it's possible thinking, it's possible designing, as we have seen yesterday, was wonderful things in Lovaina. And another thing are the surfaces. The surfaces, it's possible new life. It's possible to live in historic center, respecting all these things. For example, in another place, it's possible the new life, obviously with archaeology, but is a lift for in a garage to have two cars here in Italy, and new life here. But another things in the cities, for life in the historic center are not so good. For example, another archistar that has broken all the beautiful ambience of these streets, no? With the proportions, with the, yes. And it's possible also the life in the historic center with artisans in all this type, with, as we have seen, the horror of this, the street playing, but also can be very beautiful, respecting all these things and in a modern way. But it's also terrible and dangerous to do this as mango. And someone has given this permission, someone, and that's why we are thinking what to do with ICOMOS, because it's possible, but with economics, what is happening? The roofs here is in Vienna, but what is happening, for example, in Spain, in front of our house in Madrid, in front, this goes like this, because it's very expensive. And so what is happening? It's happening that I think someone has given the permission. Someone has given this permission. Even here, look, this. But now the urban regeneration in an historic way, in a modern way, but living and respecting the archaeology under or here, but also the problem of these stairs in Toledo. I think they are very beautiful, very important for the access to Toledo, but it's difficult to do this because here is very problem with this lift in another place of Spain. And another thing are the materials. the material, this material on the left, now is everything, everywhere for moda, and urban regeneration. Yes, this is urban regeneration. Do you think so?
This is important in this slide, the contrast. In England, contrast, Pugin, 1936, Pugin, medieval and baroque, and together, and now is the same problem. For this, we haven't the time. But in a sample of urban regeneration for ICOMOS, you must give the guideline. An example is Bilbao, before Guggenheim insertion and the urban regeneration in all districts. But in many cities, the same guideline. And then a social housing will be important in the future. ICOMOS in many countries, in Germany, in France, the social housing is important for not for the young, but for my generation. The social housing, we must the compatibility use. Or the tourism is another important topics. We must control the massive tourism. Or the compati in many museums is impossible go, in many streets it's impossible going. Allora, we must control with the administrative, with the political, with the local, or some in Marzapan, the reproduction of Stefan Dom. Ecco. Okay. Or is important the new life in some ancient village. Is in all world is the same. This is important. The agricultural landscape. We must work in this agricultural landscape, in conserving and the insertion in Italy, in Vienna, in Hungary. The last one of another problem is the industrial problem, and now the regeneration, the landscape, the protection of landscape. This is a very, very important question. For the new insertion in industrial archaeology, the new use in all countries. This is in Belgium, a museum, in Germany, in Wuch. I remember Wuch many years ago for the expo. And then some little but big problem in some courtyard, the protection. Why? This is another question. It's important. The essence of the architecture. Speak, please, after many architects speak, we must the history of the architecture. And then we must remember the some insertion, the reversibility, the famous question of the reversibility is important in theory and in practice. And for the conclusion, probably now.
Another thing, because we think that ICOMOS must be, and this theory, must be a little bit practice. How a little bit practice? We must think about this. Why? Because there are so many charts, so many documents, so many, we can have one life to do this. But so many years ago, we spoke about nada nuevo bajo el sol. Nada nuevo bajo el sol. But what we think is that ICOMOS must intervene, what? In the planning, in the cooperation with technology and restoration. Technology and restoration. For example, this is an example of historic technology. And in the other side is how we can put all this technology without endangering the, here is an industrial archaeology, but we must not danger it. And so, another thing about the law is that the law in one street is in one way, in the other street you can paint it green. That's it's impossible to have a general idea, ICOMOS a general idea, and then the historic elements that may conserve. And also, for example, here, the for the safeguarding. Yes, we must put stairs, but put the stairs, we cannot be Marco Dezzi Bardeschi, all of us, or Lorenzo Giurina, all of us. But we must take care of these stairs. We have seen this here in this country, but not in other countries. And so what we are thinking that is very important.
We think that the consideration is this is the conservation, the different declination in conservation, please, is very important. And then the different declination in restoration. And finally, out of the restoration, please, when we speak about this, the rehabilitation, please, is the improper definition. When we speak about in cultural heritage, we work in building, okay, is rehabilitation. Oh, the rehabilitation in when I have an accident, I must go in hospital and then I have the rehabilitation. This is the rehabilitation, no in cultural heritage. And the recyclage, the same, the reinstate and so. Okay, last problem is this. In Rome is this problem some week ago, but this is heritage at risk, is a problem. Please don't forget some mistake during some restoration, or heritage at risk is in the war, is the flooding, in the fire. ICOMOS must work in this. For remember our, yes, risk is every day, but for remember our cultural grandfather, heritage at risk. We must don't forget this. Probably in our meeting we must speak about this. Thank you very much and merci beaucoup.
Dear colleagues, so now we've finished the agenda of our first session. So that's time for the discussion, maybe some conclusions or proposals leading to the future. The floor is yours.
I'm Yasemin Serkay-Levent from ICOMOS Turkey and also a member of ICLAFE. From all the presentations, I have specific questions and comments for all the presentations, but I'm not going to ask them at the moment. It will take a long time. So, but in general, I would like to make my comment. I'm sorry.
Please continue.
Or ask a general question to the presenters and also all contributors here. We are talking about the philosophy, we are talking about the ethics, we are talking about the danger against cultural heritage. But at the moment, what is missing, according to my opinion, what is our human ontology while we are talking about the ethics or the philosophy especially? Because all the theories or philosophies are based on human ontologies. What kind of a human are we talking about at the moment? Is it Homo economicus or Homo politicus or Homo sociologist? Or there are different types of ontologies. If we talk about Homo economicus, then the humans we have to accept are selfish, profit-seeking, which creates danger against heritage. But if it is Homo sociological, then more passive humans we are dealing with. So maybe we can start talking about human ontology. On which ontology are we going to reconstruct ICOMOS philosophy or theory from now on? Because I think one of the missing points we have at the moment in our discussions in general. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
It's possible for me?
Yes, now we are giving the voice to Rosa Anna.
Okay. Warm greeting to all. Many thanks to Claudine Houbart for organizing this important conference. My memory and thanks for its teaching goes to Professor Raymond Lemaire, who participated in many international congress that I promoted in Naples with my professor Roberto Di Stefano in our specialization school of architectural restoration. I agree with what was underlined by colleagues so far. I would like to add a reflection. It is by now widely recognized that the future of our cultural heritage can be guaranteed especially through the active involvement of communities, and only if such heritage becomes a vital element for sustainable local development. A community can be defined as a group of individuals within the society they are part of, taking among others a common interest in the future of its cultural and natural heritage. Its role in the process of identification and management of cultural heritage was sanctioned by the UNESCO World Heritage Convention, but also the role of the communities has furthermore been recognized by international charter and legislation. There are still many challenges to be faced for a real strengthening of the involvement of citizens in a development process where cultural heritage may appear as a sustainable source capable of improving the quality of life while consolidating in the course of time the sense of identity of communities through the management of their own heritage. These challenges refer to, one, involvement of communities in the enhancement of cultural heritage, the recognition of the local values of every community is crucial in defining what must be conserved and how, so that heritage may be at all times relevant within society. Two, development of a bottom-up approach for the conservation, management, and the protection of heritage. The involvement of communities in the decision process and can contribute in the long term to every more important and sustainable system of cultural property. And finally, harmonization of international principles on conservation of heritage with the needs, beliefs, practices, and the traditions of local communities through social economic sustainable development. Thank you. I'm done. Thank you very much at all.
Any other voices from the audience or online audience? Any comments? Yes, please.
Well, thank you very much. I'm a little bit an alien body in this meeting of theoreticians and philosophers. I have been in my professional life very much involved both in architectural practice, including conservation, and in teaching both conservation theory and practice for students in art history and architectural engineering. What to me, well, from that background, from that context, is a kind of question. Listening to the presentations this morning, I have the impression that one at a certain moment should work on bridging the gap between theory and practice. And I was very happy with the last intervention, where I can imagine that from a theoretical and philosophical point, it's not always evident to understand what is happening in architectural conservation and restoration practice, and vice versa. And in that sense, I think we should not forget about the professional world. I have to remember that the 1964 meeting was a meeting of architects and technicians of monuments. And most of the attendees were architects, including, among others, our dear Andrea Bruno, as a young architect, was present very much. So in that sense, I think that's, for me, a major issue, how to bridge that potential gap, the risk of a gap between the actual architectural conservation practice and the theory and philosophy of conservation. And in that sense, in the complex scheme which was presented by Claudine in the beginning, you refer to ICROM. I mean, that's about professional training of architects, engineers, architectural historians, archaeologists, all the people really active on the site, as in a similar perspective, the Raymond de Meer Center in Leuven and other trainings for conservation professionals. And in that sense, in your scheme, I think that you should also include the world of the architects. I'm thinking we had in I think 2 or 3 meetings organized by the European Association of Architectural Education on conservation training with Yokileto, etc., etc., etc. So I think that this is still something to be developed, to translate your fundamental philosophical and theoretical concepts to what to do on the site. Boots on the ground, I would like to say. So that's probably something for the discussions tomorrow afternoon. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. As you mentioned, that's the challenge for us. When they started in 1964 or 5, the word was really simple. Isolated monument, a building, isolated building, very technical aims of the protection, and it was not complicated to find a way how to restore or conserve that building. And the problem is that nowadays the world is much more complex. Yes, we cover with our understanding of the heritage a great part of the current environment, cultural environment. So that's the challenge. How is possible to support activities which should be conducted in such a complex world with the theoretical foundations which could organize that process? That's the challenge, and that's our question, and that's the main appeal for our committee, or from our committee to the wider audience. How is it possible to organize the order in that complex world? Because we have to understand the consequence if there would, what could happen if we are not able to formulate the order. It means we give to the hand of other stakeholders, yes, but is it still the protection of the monuments? That's the question. So this is a key question and the challenge for us, and that's the question for our group. Is it possible to formulate any rules which could lead the activities in the complex world, in which the heritage, it's a very broad term. That's the problem. Still having in mind that very simple word in the 60s. Any proposals? Any proposals? Who is willing to, who is able to answer? Who is able to solve?
One proposal, ICOMOS, I remember for my history, because when work for the conservation of Centro Storico di Napoli, ICOMOS work decision, the advisor, or in other city, in Bologna, in many cities, or in Österreich, the same, because I have two nationality for ICOMOS. ICOMOS enter in the commission, with the in the ministry for the in local municipality advice, no? Many years ago, Raymond Le Maire invited, no? But also,
Calogero, please give the chance to the other.
this is my proposal. ICOMOS enter in decision, and especially our committee is the guideline from other committee probably, because our president from Belgium, from Leuven, please, we must work in this. ICOMOS, a new age for ICOMOS, for in the future, please. Okay?
Thanks a lot. Who is willing? Are there any voices, or we should start coffee break? Yes, yes, we're on time, so thanks a lot for this session. And now it's a coffee break, and after half an hour, yes, we're going to start again. So we're inviting our online colleagues, please join us after half an hour.
Yeah, maybe 20 minutes, I would say, because we are quite late. So at 12:15, maybe we meet again. Thank you.